You've probably heard the phrase, don't repeat yourself in programming. Well, today, we are going to unlock the single most important tool that makes this possible in Python, the function. Seriously, mastering this one concept is the absolute key to writing cleaner, smarter, and way more efficient code. Let's dive right in.
So, have you ever been in this situation? You're writing a program, and you find yourself typing out the exact same lines of code over and over again. You write a block, it works perfectly, and then a little later on, you need to do the same thing. So what do? You just copy and paste it.
Yeah, we've all been there. But here's the thing. That copy-paste habit is a total trap. Imagine you find a tiny bug in that code. Now you have to hunt down and fix it in every single place you pasted it. It's a nightmare. There is a much, much smarter way to work, and that's exactly what we're here to talk about.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the problem of repeating code. Then, we'll introduce functions as the ultimate solution. After that, we'll get hands-on and build one step by step. We'll also clear up the super important difference between printing and returning something. And finally, we'll wrap up with some pro tips to really level up your code.
Right, let's really dig into why copying and pasting code is such a bad idea. It's not just about things looking messy. Think about it. You copy a block of code 10 times. Then you find a mistake. You now have 10 different places you have to fix. And it is so easy to miss one. And that, my friends, is a perfect recipe for bugs that are incredibly hard to find.
So how do we fix this? The answer is the function. The best way to think of a function is like a named, reusable recipe. You write the instructions just once, you give it a cool name, like, say, make_pancakes, and then anytime you want pancakes, you just call that recipe. You don't have to write out all the steps every single time. And that's why functions are our smart tool. Using them goes way beyond just avoiding repetition. It's really about organizing your code into these nice, neat, logical pieces. And when your code is organized, it's just so much easier for you or anyone else to understand and maintain. Okay, enough talk. Let's get practical and look at the nuts and bolts of how you actually create and use a function. It's actually surprisingly simple once you see the pattern.
Building a basic function really just comes down to these 3 simple steps. First, you define it using the keyword def. Then, you write its code in an indented block right underneath. And finally, you call it by its name whenever you need it. So remember, define, indent, and call. That's it.
But what if we want our function to be a bit more flexible? Not do the exact same thing every time. That's where parameters come in. Think of a parameter like a blank space in a form. Here, name is our parameter. It's just a placeholder. The actual info we fill in when we use the function, like Alex or Sam, that's called the argument. So, just like we can send data into a function, we can also get a result back out. And we do this with the return keyword. It's like the function takes your input, does some work, and then hands you back a finished product. That product is the return value, and your program can grab it and use it for whatever's next. Now, this brings us to a concept that, I'm not gonna lie, trips up so many beginners. It's the absolutely critical difference between printing a value and returning a value. They might seem kind of similar at first glance, but they do completely different jobs.
Let's break this down with an analogy. On the left, using print is like your function shouting a number out loud. A person can hear it, they can see it on the screen, but the computer program can't grab that sound and do math with it. On the right, return is like the function quietly handing a value back to your program on a piece of paper. The program can take that paper, read the value, and use it in the next calculation. One is for showing, the other is for giving.
The thing you have to remember, if you just need to show some information to the person using your program, print is your friend. But if your program needs to actually use the result of a calculation for something else, you absolutely have to use return. Okay, so we know how values get out of a function. Let's quickly talk about what stays inside. This is a concept called scope. Think of a function like its own private room. Any variables you create in that room, like this message variable here, they only exist inside that room. If you go outside the room and try to ask for a message, Python will have no idea what you're talking about. It'll just give you an error. What happens in the function stays in the function. All right, once you've got the hang of defining, calling, and returning, you can start using a few pro tips to make your functions even more powerful and easier to read. Let's level up. Here's a really neat trick, setting a default value for a parameter. In this example, we've set city to automatically be Binghamton. What that means is, if we call the function and only give it a name, like we did with Alex, Python will just use the default city. This makes that city parameter totally optional, which is super convenient.
Now, when you have a function that takes a bunch of arguments, it can be really easy to mix up the order. Keyword arguments solve this problem completely. By specifically saying width equals 2 and length equals 5, we can pass them in any order we want. It doesn't matter. This makes our code so much clearer and safer from simple mistakes.
Whew, we have covered a lot of ground here, right? From the very basics all the way to some more advanced tricks. So after all of that, what's the big idea? What's the main thing you should take away?
Let's just boil it down to the most important points. First, the moment you catch yourself starting to repeat code, stop and create a function. Second, make a conscious choice. Use return if your program needs to work with the result, but use print if you just need to show it to a person. And finally, always remember scope. Variables born in a function stay in that function.